Some betrayals cut so deep they carve out pieces of your soul. But what they don't know is that empty spaces can be filled with something far more dangerous than love. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through our living room windows as I stood frozen in the doorway, my medical bag slipping from numb fingers. The sound it made hitting the hardwood floor seemed to echo forever. But neither of them heard it. They were too busy. Too busy destroying everything I thought I knew about my life. My husband Ryan lay sprawled across our cream-colored sectional, the one we'd picked out together on our second anniversary, with his head thrown back in pleasure. Above him, moving with practiced rhythm, was my sister, my own flesh and blood, the same sister who'd held my hand through medical school, who'd been my maid of honor, who'd cried with joy when Ryan proposed. Amber's auburn hair cascaded down her bare back like liquid fire. For a moment that stretched into eternity, I watched them move together in our home, on our furniture, surrounded by our wedding photos that smiled down from the mantelpiece like silent witnesses to this devastation. The clinic had been brutal today. 3 hours of holding Mrs. Ramirez's hand while she received news that would change her world forever. Another hour with the Hendricks family, watching their teenage sons struggle with a diagnosis that would reshape their entire future. I'd come home drained, emotionally spent, craving nothing more than Ryan's arms around me and maybe some of Amber's terrible jokes to lighten the mood. Ryan's wedding ring caught the light as his hands gripped Amber's waist, the same hands that had held me through my mother's funeral 6 months ago, the same hands that had traced my face this morning while whispering promises about our upcoming anniversary trip to Paris. That's when Amber turned her head and our eyes met. Time stopped. The world tilted on its axis. Her face went white as fresh snow, then flushed crimson. Ryan followed her gaze, and I watched the blood drain from his features as he saw me standing there like a ghost in my own home. Jessica. Amber's voice came out as a broken whisper, but I didn't speak. Couldn't speak. The words were trapped somewhere deep in my chest, tangled up with the pieces of my heart that were currently scattered across our Persian rug. I simply turned around and walked back through the door I'd just entered, my legs moving on autopilot while my mind reeled. Behind me, I heard frantic scrambling, Amber calling my name, Ryan cursing as he apparently fell off the couch. But I kept walking down our cobblestone path, past the rose bushes Ryan had planted for me last spring, past the mailbox with our names painted in cheerful yellow letters, Dr. and Mr. Mitchell. I walked until I reached my car, slid behind the wheel, and drove. Where? I didn't know. I just drove through our quiet suburban neighborhood with its perfect lawns and white picket fences, past the elementary school where children played on swings, past the coffee shop where Ryan and I had our first date 5 years ago. My phone buzzed incessantly in my purse. Text after text, call after call. I didn't need to look to know they were from both of them, probably crafting elaborate explanations, begging for forgiveness, swearing it was a mistake. But some mistakes can't be forgiven. Some betrayals run too deep for words. As I pulled into the parking lot of the old lighthouse overlooking the harbor, our special place where Ryan had proposed, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I'd witnessed. The sob that escaped my throat was raw and primal, echoing off the car windows as I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. They'd stolen everything from me. My marriage, my family, my trust, my future. Every dream we'd built together, every plan we'd made, every moment of happiness we'd shared, all of it tainted now by their deception. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the missed calls. 15 from Ryan, 12 from Amber. Their desperation was almost palpable through the screen. Let them sweat. Let them wonder. Let them fear what comes next. The lighthouse stood tall against the darkening sky, a beacon that had once represented hope and new beginnings when Ryan dropped to one knee right there on the observation deck. Now it just looked cold and distant, much like the future stretching out before me. I watched the waves crash against the rocks below, thinking about how quickly life can change. This morning, I was Dr. Jessica Lewis, respected physician with a loving husband and close-knit family. Now I was with the woman whose husband and sister betrayed her in the most intimate way possible. But as I sat there watching the sea foam dissipate on the jagged stones, something else began to grow alongside the pain, something cold and calculating that felt foreign, yet strangely comforting. They thought they knew me. Sweet, forgiving Jessica, the one who always saw the best in people, who gave second chances, who bent over backward to keep peace in the family. The dedicated doctor who spent her days healing others, who couldn't hurt a fly. They had no idea what they'd just awakened. I've learned a few things during my medical training that had nothing to do with healing. I'd learned about pressure points and psychological warfare, about how to read people's deepest fears and how to exploit their weaknesses with surgical precision. I'd learned that sometimes the most devastating wounds are the ones that don't bleed. As the sun began to set over the harbor, painting the sky in shades of red that reminded me of Amber's hair, I started my car and headed not home, but to the Grandview Hotel downtown, not to forgive or forget, but to begin planning. They wanted to play games with my life, fine, but they were about to discover that I played by very different rules. 3 days had passed since what I now thought of as the incident, and I hadn't spoken to either of them. Not a word. My phone had finally stopped buzzing constantly, though the occasional desperate text still came through. I'd been staying at the Grandview Hotel, a place Ryan and I had never been together. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was hiding in my own city, but I needed space to think, to plan. The hotel room had become my war room. Medical journals spread across the desk alongside printed emails, bank statements, and legal documents. I'd always been organized, it was essential in my profession, but now that skill had taken on a darker purpose. My laptop screen glowed with research tabs, divorce lawyers, private investigators, property law, and various other subjects that would have seemed innocuous to anyone else, but were building blocks in my carefully constructed plan. The knock on my door came at exactly 2:47 p.m. I knew because I'd been expecting it. "Jessica, I know you're in there." Ryan's voice carried through the thick hotel door, strained and desperate. "Please, just talk to me. Let me explain." I remained perfectly still on the bed, laptop balanced on my knees, continuing to type notes about asset division, community property, separate property, how to protect what was mine before the storm hit. "I've been to every hotel in the city. The receptionist downstairs recognized you from the photo I showed her." His voice cracked slightly. "Baby, please, you can't just disappear like this." The endearment that once made my heart flutter now made my stomach turn. I saved my document and closed the laptop, but I didn't move toward the door. "Amber told me she came clean to Eric," Ryan continued, referring to Amber's husband of 3 years. "He threw her out. She's staying at Mom's now, crying constantly. She says she's going to lose her mind if you don't talk to her." Good. I thought, let her suffer. Let her understand what it feels like when your world crumbles. But I said nothing aloud. "Jessica, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. What you saw, God, I can't imagine how that felt. But it wasn't what it looked like." I almost laughed at that. The oldest line in the cheating spouse handbook. It was a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake that happened once. Amber was going through problems with Eric, and she came over to talk. We had some wine and they got out of hand. It didn't mean anything. It was just physical, meaningless. Making it worse with every word, I noted clinically, not only had he betrayed me, but he was insulting my intelligence by lying about it. They'd moved together with too much familiarity, too much comfort. This hadn't been a one-time mistake fueled by alcohol and poor judgment. This had been an affair. "I love you, Jessica. Only you. I've loved you since the day we met at that terrible medical convention where the coffee was cold and the speakers were boring. And you made that joke about the anatomical diagram of being upside down. Remember? I did remember. I also remembered Amber being at that same convention. supposedly supporting my career. Had they met then? 2. Had they been carrying on behind my back for 5 years? The questions that had been eating at me for 3 days suddenly crystallized into a plan so perfect, so poetic, that I almost smiled. Please just open the door. Let me see your face. Let me hold you and make this right. Instead, I reached for my phone and typed out a single text message to Ryan. Meet me at Marcello's tomorrow at 7 p.m. Come alone. Marcello's was the Italian restaurant where we'd had our first anniversary dinner, where he'd promised me forever while feeding me tiramisu and whispering about the children we'd have someday. My phone buzzed immediately with his response. Thank God, yes, I'll be there. I love you. I didn't reply. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts until I found Eric Morrison, Amber's soon-to-be ex-husband. We'd always gotten along well at family gatherings. He was a good man, a high school history teacher with a dry sense of humor and a genuine love for my sister that she'd apparently never appreciated. Eric, it's Jessica. I know this is awkward given everything that's happened, but I was wondering if we could meet for coffee sometime this week. I think we need to talk. His response came faster than I'd expected. I was hoping you'd reach out. How about tomorrow afternoon? There are things you need to know about Ryan and Amber. Things that go back further than you think. My blood chilled as I read those words. Further back than I thought. How long had this been going on? 300 p.m. at Brewster's Cafe on 5th Street. I replied. See you there. And Jessica, I'm sorry about everything. I set the phone aside and returned to my laptop, but my mind was racing. Eric had information I could use. Outside my hotel window, the city sparkled in the afternoon sun, oblivious to the fact that by this time tomorrow, several lives would be forever changed, including mine. But for the first time since I'd walked through my front door 3 days ago, I felt something other than devastating pain. I felt purpose. Brewster's Cafe buzzed with the usual afternoon crowd of college students and remote workers, their conversations creating a perfect cover for what was about to be a very revealing discussion. I'd chosen a corner table with a clear view of both entrances, a habit I'd developed during my residency when I learned to always have an exit strategy. Eric arrived precisely at 3:00 p.m., looking like he'd aged a decade since I'd last seen him at Amber's birthday party 3 months ago. His usually neat brown hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. But what struck me most was the way he carried himself, like a man who'd been hollowed out from the inside. Jessica, he slid into the chair across from me, and I was surprised by the warmth in his voice despite everything. You look well. You look like hell, if I'm being honest, I said dryly. Thanks. He managed a weak smile. You're not exactly glowing yourself. The barista approached, and Eric ordered black coffee. Make it a double, he added. We sat in uncomfortable silence until his drink arrived. Eric wrapped his hands around the mug like it was anchoring him to reality. How long? I asked without preamble. That's complicated. Eric took a long sip of coffee, then met my eyes. The physical affair, about 8 months, based on what I've been able to piece together. But Jessica, he leaned forward, lowering his voice. They've been emotionally involved for much longer than that. My stomach clenched. How much longer? Remember Amber's engagement party 4 years ago? I nodded. Ryan and I had only been dating for a year then, but he'd been so charming with my family, helping Amber plan the perfect celebration for her and Eric. Ryan volunteered to help with everything, the flowers, the venue, the menu. Amber was so grateful. Kept talking about how lucky you were to have such a thoughtful boyfriend. Eric's laugh was bitter. I thought it was sweet. My wife's future brother-in-law caring so much about making her day special. But it wasn't about making her day special, I said, the pieces clicking into place. No, it was about getting close to her. I found their old text messages on Amber's phone last week when I was looking for our insurance information after she left. Messages going back years. Jessica, compliments that crossed lines, inside jokes I was never part of, late-night conversations that had nothing to do with party planning. The betrayal deepened with each word. For years, they'd been building this connection for 4 years, while I'd been blissfully unaware, planning a life with a man who was slowly falling for my sister. "Why didn't you say anything before?" I asked. Eric's face crumpled slightly. "Because I loved her. Because I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, that the weird tensions I felt were just in my head. Because every time I brought up Ryan, Amber would get defensive and accuse me of being jealous and controlling. But you knew, deep down." "Yeah, I knew." The way she'd light up when your name came up in conversation because it meant Ryan's stories would follow. The way she always volunteered to help you guys move or paint your house or organize parties. The way she dressed differently when she knew she'd see him. I thought back to all those occasions, viewing them now through this new, horrifying lens. Amber had been there for everything: our housewarming party, Ryan's birthday celebrations, our anniversary dinners, always ready to help, always so supportive of our relationship, always positioning herself right in the middle of our lives. "There's more," Eric continued. "Last month, when you were at that medical conference in Chicago, Amber told me she was having a girls' night with her college friends. But I drove past your house around midnight, and Ryan's car was there. So was Amber's. The medical conference. I'd been presenting research on trauma treatment. So proud that Ryan had encouraged me to go even though it meant missing his company picnic. Amber had texted me the whole weekend, asking about my presentations, telling me how much she missed our sister time. She'd been lying the entire weekend while sleeping with my husband. I confronted her the next day. Eric said, she swore nothing happened, that she just stopped by to drop off something she'd borrowed from you, and they'd ended up talking late about marriage problems. Marriage problems. My voice was sharp. Eric nodded grimly. According to Amber, you and Ryan had been fighting a lot. You were always working, never home, didn't appreciate him. She was just being a supportive friend and sister. Listening to his concerns about your relationship, the audacity was breathtaking. They'd been having an affair while simultaneously painting me as the problem in my own marriage. For the record, Eric added quietly, I never believed her. Ryan always seemed crazy about you. And Amber, she was projecting. We were the ones having problems, mainly because she was always distracted, always somewhere else mentally, even when she was with me. I pulled out my phone and started typing notes. Eric, I need to ask you something. Okay. Do you want to get back at them? He was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. What did you have in mind? I'm not sure yet, but I have some ideas forming, and they're going to need both of us to work. Jessica, Eric set down his coffee cup. I can see something in your eyes right now that honestly scares me a little. What exactly are you planning? I smiled, and I could feel how cold it was. Nothing illegal, nothing that will physically hurt anyone, but Ryan and Amber took something from both of us, and I think it's time they faced some consequences. Eric was quiet for another long moment. Then, what do you need from me? Information, evidence, and most importantly, I leaned forward. I need you to trust me completely, even when what I'm asking doesn't make sense. Can you do that? He extended his hand across the table. Partners. I shook it. Partners. As we exchanged contact information and began planning our next moves, I felt something I hadn't experienced in days. Hope. Not for reconciliation or forgiveness, but for justice. Ryan and Amber thought they'd been so clever, so careful. They'd probably convinced themselves that they were the victims, here star-crossed lovers torn between passion and loyalty. They had no idea that their worst nightmare was just getting started, and it was being orchestrated by the two people who knew them best. Marcello's hadn't changed since our anniversary dinner 2 years ago. The same dim lighting, the same red checkered tablecloths, the same elderly waiter who remembered every customer's favorite dish. I'd arrived 15 minutes early and positioned myself at our usual table by the window. Watching Ryan's reflection in the glass as he entered the restaurant, he looked terrible. His normally perfect hair was unkempt, his designer shirt wrinkled, and he moved with the uncertain gait of a man walking through a minefield. Good. Let him suffer through every second of uncertainty. Jessica, he approached the table like I might bolt at any moment. Thank you for agreeing to meet me. I gestured to the chair across from me without speaking. Let him feel the silence. Let him reveal more than he intended. Ryan sat down heavily, his hands shaking slightly as he reached across the table toward mine. I pulled my hands into my lap. You look beautiful, he said softly. You always look beautiful. But tonight, I've missed you so much. I'd spent an hour getting ready not to look beautiful for him, but to look like the woman he was losing, the red dress he'd bought me for my birthday, the necklace he'd given me for our wedding, a reminder of everything he'd thrown away. How's Amber? I asked, my voice neutral. Ryan flinched. Jessica, I don't want to talk about. How is she? Ryan. He swallowed hard. She's staying with your mother. She's devastated. She knows she's destroyed everything, and she can barely function. She asked me to tell you how sorry she is. And are you sorry? God, yes, Jessica. I'm so sorry. I can't even breathe properly. What you saw, what happened. It was the biggest mistake of my life. The same script he'd delivered through my hotel room door. I wondered if he'd practiced it in the mirror. Tell me about the mistake, I said calmly. When did it start? Ryan's eyes darted around the restaurant. It didn't start anywhere. It was just that one time. Amber was upset about Eric, and she came over to talk, and we drank too much wine, and things just happened. Strike one. Eric had already told me about the 8 months of physical affair, the 4 years of emotional connection. Ryan was still lying, still trying to minimize the damage. What kind of problems was Amber having with Eric? I don't know. Marriage stuff. She said they weren't connecting anymore, that he didn't understand her. Strike two. Eric had painted a picture of a man desperate to save his marriage while Amber pulled away, distracted by her feelings for my husband. Our waiter approached, but I waved him away. This conversation required privacy. Ryan, I said, leaning forward slightly, I want you to look me in the eyes and tell me the truth. How long has this been going on? He met my gaze, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd fallen in love with, the one who used to be honest with me about everything. 6 weeks, he said finally. It started 6 weeks ago when you were working those double shifts at the hospital. I was lonely, and Amber was having problems with Eric, and we started talking more. It was innocent at first, just friendship. But then, strike three. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a screenshot Eric had sent me earlier. A text message from Amber to Ryan dated 3 months ago. Can't stop thinking about last night. When can we be together again? I turned the phone so Ryan could see the screen. The color drained from his face. Where did you get that? Eric found Amber's old phone in their storage unit when he was packing her things. She'd apparently forgotten and she'd backed up her messages to it. A lie, but a convincing one. There are dozens more, Ryan, going back months. Should I show you the one where she talks about how much better you are in bed than Eric? Or the one where you two discuss how to gradually end both of your marriages? Ryan's hands were visibly shaking now. Now, Jessica, I can explain. No, I put the phone away. You can't explain why you and my sister have been planning to destroy 2 marriages for months. You can't explain why you have been lying to my face every day while sleeping with her. And you certainly can't explain why you're still lying to me right now. I love you, he said desperately. Whatever you think you know, whatever those messages say, the truth is that I love you. Only you. Amber was she was an escape from the pressure of our marriage, from work, from everything. She doesn't mean anything to me. But I meant something to her, I said quietly. I was her sister, her maid of honor, the person she called when she needed advice or support or just someone to listen. And you were my husband, the person I trusted most in the world. Tears were streaming down Ryan's face now. I know. I know how badly I screwed up. But Jessica, please, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work through this together. I'll do whatever it takes. I studied his face, memorizing this moment, the desperation, the fear, the dawning realization that his carefully constructed lies were crumbling around him. Okay, I said softly. Okay. Hope flared in his eyes. I'm willing to try, but there have to be conditions. Anything. Name it. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my purse. I had my lawyer draw up a post-nuptial agreement. If we're going to work on our marriage, I need some security. Ryan unfolded the paper, and I watched his expression change as he read. The agreement was heavily weighted in my favor. I would retain sole ownership of my medical practice, our savings account, and the house we'd bought together. Ryan would keep his business and his car, but everything else would be considered separate property going forward. This is pretty extreme. Jessica, you destroyed our financial partnership when you started sleeping with my sister. If you want to rebuild trust, you'll prove you're committed to making things right. Ryan stared at the paper for a long moment. What about Amber? What happens with her? You'll have no contact with her, ever. If she comes to family events, you don't attend. If she calls you, hang up. If she shows up at our house, you call the police. Complete and total no contact. And if I agree to all of this, I reached across the table and took his hand, letting him see hope in my eyes. Then we go home tonight and start over. Clean slate. Ryan's relief was palpable. Yes, absolutely. Where do I sign? I handed him a pen, and he signed the post-nuptial agreement without reading the fine print, without noticing the clause that gave me the right to dissolve the marriage and keep everything if he violated the no-contact order, without realizing that I had just legally protected myself before the real revenge began. I love you so much, Ryan said as he finished signing. I promise you won't regret this. I'm going to spend every day making this up to you. I smiled and squeezed his hand. I'm counting on it. But as we left Marcello's together, Ryan's arm around my shoulders like nothing had ever happened, my mind was already moving to phase 2 of my plan. The hardest part was over. I had my husband exactly where I needed him. Now it was Amber's turn. The text message arrived at 6:42 a.m., just as I was finishing my morning coffee on our back patio. Ryan had left early for a business meeting, kissing me goodbye with what he probably thought was convincing tenderness. I'd smiled and kissed him back, playing the role of the forgiving wife perfectly. Jessica, please, I know you hate me, but I need to talk to you. I'm losing my mind. Mom won't stop crying. Eric won't return my calls, and Ryan won't even look at me. You're the only family I have left. Amber, right on schedule. I'd been waiting for this message since Eric told me she'd been staying with our mother. Mom had always been Amber's soft place to land, the one who made excuses for her impulsive behavior and cleaned up her messes. But even Mom's patience had limits. And apparently, sleeping with your sister's husband crossed several of them. I typed back, meet me at Grandview Park at 10:00 a.m., by the pond where we used to feed the ducks as kids. The response was immediate. God, Jessica, thank you. I'll be there. I spent the next 3 hours preparing. Not physically, this conversation would be raw and emotional, and I needed to look like I'd been crying, like I was barely holding myself together. But mentally, I rehearsed every word, every gesture, every possible response Amber might have. Grandview Park held decades of memories for us. Birthday parties, family picnics, countless afternoons spent splashing in the pontoon while Mom watched from a bench nearby. Amber had taught me to ride a bike on these paths. I'd helped her practice her valedictorian speech under the old oak tree by the pavilion. We'd been best friends once before she grew up beautiful and charming, while I grew up studious and serious, before she learned that she could take anything she wanted, including the things that belonged to me. Amber was already there when I arrived, sitting on our old bench facing the pond. She looked as broken as Eric had described. Her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, no makeup, wearing clothes that looked like she'd slept in them. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. For just a moment, seeing her like this, I felt an echo of the old protective instinct I'd once had for my little sister. Then I remembered the sight of her moving above my husband in our living room, and the feeling vanished. Jessica, she looked up as I approached, her face streaked with tears. You came. I sat down beside her, leaving space between us, close enough to talk, far enough to maintain distance. You look awful, I said simply. Amber let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I feel worse than I look, if that's possible. She turned toward me, and I could see the desperation in her eyes. Jessica, I know I have no right to ask this, but please let me explain. Explain what? How you seduced my husband, how long you've been sleeping with him, how you lied to my face every day while planning to destroy my marriage. It wasn't like that, Amber said quickly. It wasn't planned. It just happened. For 8 months, Amber's face went white. How did you? Eric found your old messages. All of them. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the screenshots Eric had shared. Would you like me to read a few? Maybe the one where you tell Ryan how much you love the way he says your name during sex, or the one where you discuss which hotel rooms have the best privacy. Amber buried her face in her hands. Oh God, Eric saw those. Eric saw everything. Every lie you told him, every excuse you made, every time you manipulated him into thinking he was the problem in your marriage. I kept my voice calm, clinical. He's filing for divorce. By the way, his lawyer says it should be finalized within 6 months. Jessica, please, I know I've made terrible mistakes, but I need you to understand. Understand what? The anger I'd been carefully controlling finally leaked into my voice. Understand how my own sister decided to systematically destroy my life. Understand how you pretended to care about my marriage while sabotaging it from the inside. I didn't mean for it to happen. Amber's voice rose to near hysteria. I came to you and Ryan for help when Eric and I started having problems. You were always working, so Ryan was the one who listened to me, who made me feel like I mattered. It started as friendship, but then you decided you wanted him for yourself. I fell in love with him, Amber whispered. I tried to fight it, tried to stay away. But Jessica, I've never felt anything like what I feel for Ryan. He understands me in ways Eric never did. The audacity was stunning. She was asking me to sympathize with her great love story, a love story that starred my husband. And what about me? I asked quietly. Did you think about me at all while you were painting in love with Ryan? Amber's tears came harder now. Every day, God, Jessica, thinking about you is torture. I hated myself for what I was feeling, for what we were doing, but I couldn't stop. I tried to end it so many times, but Ryan, he felt the same way about me. So you decided I was the problem. I was the obstacle standing in the way of your happiness. No, I don't know. Amber wiped her eyes with her sleeve. I told myself that maybe you and Ryan weren't really right for each other. You're so different. You're serious and focused on your career, and he's more spontaneous and emotional. I thought maybe you'd be happier with someone who understood your priorities better. How convenient. You get my husband, and I get consoled with the idea that I deserve better. I shook my head. Anyway, Amber, I'm trying to be honest with you about how I felt, how I justified what I was doing. I know it was wrong. I know I hurt you in the worst possible way. But I need you to know that I never wanted to hurt you. I turned to face her fully. Amber, I want you to listen to me very carefully. You didn't just hurt me. You didn't just betray me. You systematically dismantled my life while pretending to be my loving sister. You manipulated Ryan. You lied to Eric. You deceived our entire family. And now you're sitting here asking me to understand and forgive you because you fell in love. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Amber said quickly. I know I don't deserve that. I'm just asking for a chance to make things right somehow. There is no making this right. Amber's face crumpled. So, what happens now? Do I lose everyone? My marriage, my sister, my family? Do I lose everything because I made one terrible mistake? I almost laughed at her phrasing. One mistake. As if 8 months of calculated deception could be reduced to a single moment of poor judgment. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice taking on the tone I used with difficult patience. You're going to stay away from Ryan completely. No calls, no texts, no showing up at his office or our house. If you see him at family events, you pretend he doesn't exist. Jessica, I'm not finished. You're going to get therapy. Real therapy, not just someone to validate your feelings. You're going to figure out why you thought it was acceptable to destroy your sister's marriage. And you're going to work on becoming the kind of person who would never do something like this again. Amber nodded eagerly. Yes, absolutely. I'll do whatever you want. And finally, I saw, you're going to wait. You're going to wait while Ryan and I decide whether our marriage can survive what you two did to it. You don't get to know the outcome. You don't get updates. You don't get to interfere or offer opinions or try to fix things. You wait, and you hope that someday, years from now, I might be able to look at you without seeing the worst betrayal of my life. How long? Amber whispered. I don't know. Maybe forever. We sat in silence for several minutes, watching the ducks glide across the pond. Finally, Amber spoke. For what it's worth, Ryan chose you. When you came home that day and caught us, he made it clear that it was over between us. He said he'd been confused, that he loved you and wanted to save your marriage. He broke my heart to try to save yours. Ryan had told me the affair was meaningless, just physical. But according to Amber, he'd been confused about his feelings, which suggested something deeper. Another lie from my loving husband. Amber, I said as I stood to leave, I need you to understand something. This conversation, this attempt at reconciliation, it's not for you. It's for Mafik. I needed to look you in the eye and hear you try to justify what you did. I needed to see if there was any part of my sister left in you, or if you'd completely become someone I don't recognize. And her voice was barely audible. I got my answer. I walked away without looking back, leaving Amber alone on the bench where we'd spent so many happy afternoons as children. Behind me, I could hear her sobbing, but I felt no urge to comfort her. Phase 2 was complete. Amber was isolated, guilt-ridden, and completely cut off from Ryan. Now she would sit in that misery, wondering if she'd lost everything for a man who'd chosen his wife over her in the end. But the real masterpiece was still to come, because while Amber thought Ryan had chosen me, and while Ryan thought I was willing to rebuild our marriage, neither of them understood the true nature of my plan. They were both about to learn that some games have rules only one player knows. 3 weeks into our reconciliation, Ryan had settled into the role of repentant husband with surprising dedication. He brought me coffee in bed every morning, left love notes in my medical bag, and planned romantic dinners that felt like elaborate apologies. To anyone watching, we looked like a couple working through their problems with maturity and commitment. The performance was exhausting. Dr. Lewis, my nurse, Angela, poked her head into my office where I was reviewing patient files. Your husband is here with flowers. Should I send him back? I glanced at the clock. 2:30 p.m. Right on schedule. Ryan had been surprising me at work every few days, always with some grand gesture designed to show my colleagues how devoted he was to making our marriage work. Send him in, I said quickly, minimizing the browser window where I'd been researching property law. Ryan entered carrying a bouquet of white roses. My supposed favorite, though I'd always preferred daisies. He'd forgotten so many little details about me over the years, too busy paying attention to Amber's preferences instead. Hey, beautiful. He leaned down to kiss my cheek, and I forced myself not to recoil. I was in the neighborhood and thought you might need some cheering up after that difficult case this morning. Mrs. Ramirez's follow-up appointment. Ryan had actually been listening when I'd mentioned it at breakfast, which was more attention than he'd paid to my work in months. They're lovely, I said, accepting the flowers. But you didn't need to drive across town just for this. I wanted to. I want to show you every day how much you mean to me. His voice carried that earnest tone I'd once found endearing and now recognized as manipulation. Besides, I have news. Oh, Ryan pulled up a chair, settling in like he planned to stay a while. I got a call from the Morrison Group. They want to offer me a partnership position in their Seattle office. My blood chilled, but I kept my expression neutral. Seattle, that's quite a move. It would be perfect for us. Jessica, a fresh start away from all the memories and complications here. We could buy a house on the water, and you could find a position at one of the hospitals there. Maybe even take some time off to focus on starting our family. Starting our family. We talked about children for years, but I'd always wanted to wait until my practice was more established. Now I understood why Ryan had suddenly become so enthusiastic about the idea. It would tie me to him permanently and give him an excuse to move us far away from Amber. It sounds like a wonderful opportunity, I said carefully. When would this start? They'd want me there by the end of next month. I know it's fast, but Jessica, this could be exactly what we need. A chance to rebuild somewhere new. Just the two of us. Just the two of us. No Amber, no Eric, no reminders of his betrayal. Ryan had found the perfect solution: remove all evidence of his affair and start fresh with a wife who'd already proven she was willing to forgive him. I'll think about it, I said. Ryan's face fell slightly. I was hoping you'd be more excited. This is a huge opportunity for my career, and it would solve so many of our problems. Our problems. I set down my pen and I looked at him directly. I thought we were working through our problems here. We are, but Ryan ran his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd learned to recognize. It's hard, Jessica, being in the same city as Amber, knowing she's struggling because of what happened between us. I see her car sometimes when I'm driving around town, and I feel terrible about the pain I had caused her. There was the truth. Slipping out despite his careful facade, Ryan didn't want to move to Seattle for our marriage. He wanted to escape the guilt of seeing Amber suffer. You feel terrible about the pain you caused her. I repeated slowly. Yes, no, I feel terrible about the pain I caused everyone. Ryan leaned forward, reaching for my hands. But especially you. You're the one I hurt most, and you're the one I love. That's why this move would be so good for us. I let him take my hands, noting how his touch no longer sent any flutter of attraction through me. Ryan, can I ask you something? Anything. When you were with Amber, did you ever think about leaving me for her? The question caught him off guard. I watched the careful composure slip from his features as he struggled to find the right answer. That's not important now, he said finally. It's important to me. Ryan was quiet for a long moment, his thumbs tracing circles on my knuckles. There were moments when I was confused about my feelings. Amber and I connected in ways that felt intense, but I never seriously considered leaving you. Our marriage, our life together, that always meant more to me than whatever I was feeling for her. Another lie. Eric had shown me text messages where Ryan and Amber discussed their future together, including detailed plans about how to gradually separate from their spouses without causing too much drama. And now, I asked, do you still have feelings for her? No. Ryan's answer came too quickly. What I felt for Amber was infatuation, maybe some kind of midlife crisis. But what I feel for you is real love, the kind that lasts. I pulled my hands free and stood up, moving to the window where I could look out at the parking lot. Ryan's BMW was parked next to my Honda, looking sleek and expensive, and completely out of place among the modest cars my patients drove. I need some time to think about Seattle, I said without turning around. Of course, take all the time you need. Ryan stood and moved behind me, his hands settling on my shoulders. I just want you to know that wherever we go, whatever we do, my priority is making you trust me again. I leaned back against him, letting him think I was accepting his comfort. I know, I whispered. But as Ryan held me, neither of us speaking, I was calculating timelines and possibilities. Seattle would complicate my plans significantly, but it wouldn't derail them. If anything, Ryan's desperation to escape the consequences of his actions would make the final phase even more devastating. After Ryan left, I pulled out my phone and called Eric. Jessica, how's the performance going? He wants to move us to Seattle, new job, fresh start, the whole package. Eric was quiet for a moment. That's actually perfect. How do you figure? Because Amber's been talking about following him. She's convinced that if she can just get Ryan alone, away from you and all the guilt, she can win him back. She told you this. She's been leaving me voicemails trying to convince me to help her get Ryan back so we can both move on with our lives. Apparently, she's been researching job opportunities in Seattle. I smiled, though Eric couldn't see it. Interesting. And what did you tell her? That she's delusional if she thinks I'd help her chase after your husband. Eric, I need you to do something for me. It's going to sound strange, but trust me. What do you need? I need you to encourage her. Excuse me. Tell Amber that maybe she's right. Maybe Ryan only chose me because I caught them. And maybe if she could get him alone somewhere new, she'd have a real chance with him. Make her believe that following us to Seattle is her best shot at happiness. Eric was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Jessica, what exactly are you planning, Justice? I said simply, for both of us. That evening, I found Ryan in his study, laptop open, presumably researching Seattle neighborhoods. He looked up when I entered, hope brightening his features. I've been thinking about your job offer, I said, settling into the chair across from his desk. And I think you're right. A fresh start could be exactly what we need. I watched relief flood his face. When do we need to give them an answer? Ryan was around the desk and pulling me into his arms before I could blink. Really, you mean it? I mean it, I said, allowing myself to be held. But I have one condition. Name it. I want us to renew our wedding vows before we move. Something small and private, just us and a few close family members. I want to publicly recommit to our marriage before we start this new chapter. Ryan pulled back to look at me, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Jessica, that's perfect. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Good, I said, reaching up to touch his face. Because I want everyone to see how much we love each other. I want them to witness our commitment to making this work. What I didn't tell Ryan was that I also wanted everyone to witness what happened when that commitment was inevitably broken. Because phase 3 of my plan was about to begin, and it required an audience. The vow renewal invitations were works of art, cream card stock with gold embossing, carefully worded to convey both celebration and redemption. Ryan had insisted on the best of everything: the venue, the flowers, the photographer. He wanted our recommitment ceremony to be a public declaration that our marriage had survived its greatest test. He had no idea it would actually be a funeral. They're beautiful, Angela said, examining one of the invitations I'd brought to the office. Though I have to say, after everything that happened with your sister, having a vow renewal seems incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Time will tell, I replied, sealing another envelope. The guest list had been carefully curated: our parents, a few close friends, Ryan's business partners, some colleagues from the hospital, and after much deliberation, Amber and Eric. Ryan had protested including them. Jessica, I don't think that's wise. It might be too painful, too complicated. And their family, I'd insisted. If we're really starting fresh, if we've really forgiven and moved forward, then we shouldn't be afraid of having them there. But Amber might be uncomfortable. Let Amber decide what she can handle. I'm extending the invitation. What she does with it is up to her. The truth was, I needed Amber there. The entire plan hinged on her attendance. On her seeing Ryan publicly commit to me while she sat in the audience knowing she'd lost him forever. Eric had done his job perfectly. According to his reports, Amber was now convinced that following us to Seattle was her only chance at winning Ryan back. She'd even started applying for jobs there, telling Eric to his face that she was going to fight for the love of her life. The delusion was breathtaking, but it served my purposes perfectly. 2 weeks before the ceremony, I received a call from Amber. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Jessica. Her voice was shaky, uncertain. I got your invitation, and I want to come. I know that sounds crazy, but I want to be there to support you and Ryan to show that I respect your marriage, and I'm genuinely happy that you're working things out. The performance was almost convincing. Almost. Are you sure that's what I asked? It might be painful for you. I've been in therapy like you suggested. Dr. Hendricks says that facing difficult situations head-on is part of my healing process. Besides, you're my sister. If you can forgive me enough to invite me, I can be strong enough to attend. Dr. Hendricks, I made a mental note to look into Amber's therapist. I wondered if she was being honest about her progress or simply learning to lie more convincingly. What about Eric? I asked. He's not coming. He thinks it would be too awkward. And honestly, I agree. This should be about you and Ryan, not about our failed marriage. Perfect. Amber would be there alone, vulnerable and isolated, watching the man she thought she loved pledge his eternal devotion to me. I'll see you there soon, I said simply. Jessica. Amber's voice caught. Thank you for including me, for giving me a chance to show that I can be the sister you deserve. It means everything to me. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, staring out at the city where I'd built my life and career. In 2 weeks, I would stand in front of everyone who mattered to me and promise to love, honor, and cherish a man who had betrayed me in the deepest possible way. And then I would keep that promise for exactly as long as it suited my purposes. My phone buzzed with a text from Eric. A is definitely planning to follow you to Seattle. She's been looking at apartments online and has 3 job interviews lined up. She's convinced that once you and Ryan are away from all the negative influences here, he'll realize he made a mistake choosing you. I texted back, perfect. How's your end coming along? Everything's in place. The evidence is compiled. The timeline is documented. And I've made sure certain people will be in the right place at the right time. Are you sure you want to go through with this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Then God help them both. The morning of the ceremony dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect spring day that made everything look like a fairy tale. Ryan had been up since dawn, nervous energy radiating from him as he double-checked every detail. The flowers arrived an hour ago, he announced, bringing me coffee in bed. They're perfect. Everything's perfect. I sat up, accepting the cup and studying his face. He looked genuinely happy for the first time in months, like a man who'd been given an unexpected second chance at paradise. Are you nervous? I asked. Terrified, Ryan admitted, sitting on the edge of the bed. What if I mess up my vows? What if people think this is all just for show? What if... I silenced him with a kiss, tasting the desperation beneath his anxiety. Ryan, today is about us, about our commitment to each other. Nothing else matters. I love you so much, he whispered against my lips. I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that to you. I know you are, I said softly. And he would, just not in the way he imagined. 3 hours later, I stood in the bridal suite at Riverside Gardens, the same venue where we'd held our original wedding 5 years ago. My mother fluttered around me, adjusting my dress and chattering nervously about the guest list. I still can't believe you invited Amber, she said for the 3rd time. After what she did. She's my sister, Mom, and she's getting help. Dr. Hendricks says, Dr. Hendricks can say whatever she wants. That girl destroyed your marriage and nearly ruined our entire family. The fact that you're forgiving enough to include her today just shows how much bigger a person you are than she is. Through the window, I could see guests arriving, Ryan's parents looking distinguished and slightly uncomfortable, my colleagues from the hospital, dressed in their finest clothes and probably gossiping about the circumstances that had led to this renewal. A few neighbors who'd been friends with both couples and were undoubtedly curious about the drama. And there, Wete, stepping out of a taxi in a navy blue dress that hugged her curves perfectly, was Amber. She looked beautiful as always, but there was something different about her today. A determined set to her shoulders, a calculated precision in her movements. This wasn't the broken, repentant woman who'd cried beside the pond 3 weeks ago. This was a woman with a plan, which was perfect because so was I. "It's time," Angela announced from the doorway. "The ceremony's about to begin." I took one last look in the mirror, smoothing the silk of my white dress, not a wedding gown, but something elegant and symbolic. The woman looking back at me was calm, composed, ready for what was to come. "Let's go," I said. As we walked toward the ceremony space, I caught a glimpse of Ryan standing at the altar, handsome in his dark suit, looking like every woman's dream of the perfect husband. The same man who'd held me through my mother's illness, who'd encouraged my career, who'd promised me forever on a day much like this one 5 years ago. The same man who'd been planning to leave me for my sister while pretending to work on our marriage. The officiant, a family friend who'd known us for years, smiled warmly as I approached. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness Ryan and Jessica as they renew their wedding vows and recommit to their sacred union." I found Amber in the small crowd, sitting in the third row with tears already streaming down her face. She was watching Ryan with naked longing, probably imagining herself in my place, probably convinced that after the ceremony, she'd find a way to pull him aside and confess her love one more time. Ryan took my hands, his voice strong and clear as he began the vows we'd written together. "Jessica, 5 years ago, I promised to love you for better or worse, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer. I broke those promises and I hurt you in ways that words can't express. But today, standing here in front of our family and friends, I want to make those promises again with a deeper understanding of what they mean. Beautiful words, carefully crafted, emotionally resonant, designed to convince everyone present that Ryan Mitchell was a changed man who'd learned from his mistakes. If only they knew what I'd learned about his mistakes. If only they knew what was coming next." As Ryan finished his vows and the officiant turned to me, I caught Eric's eye in the back row. He gave me an almost imperceptible nod. Everything was in place. "Jessica," the officiant prompted gently, "your vows." I turned to face Ryan, looking deep into his eyes as I began to speak. "Ryan," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the assembled guests. 5 years ago, I married a man I thought I knew completely, a man I trusted with my heart, my future, and my deepest secrets." Ryan smiled, thinking he knew where this was going. He had no idea. "I believed in us," I continued, never breaking eye contact with Ryan. "I believed in the promises we made, the life we were building together, the love we shared, even when things got difficult, even when we grew apart. I never doubted that we were committed to working through our problems together." Ryan's smile wavered slightly. This wasn't matching the vows we'd rehearsed. "But 5 years of marriage taught me something important about trust," I said, my voice still calm and clear. "It taught me that trust isn't just about believing someone when they tell you they love you. It's about believing they'll respect you enough to tell you the truth, even when the truth is painful." A murmur went through the crowd. This definitely wasn't a traditional renewal ceremony. "Ryan, I want to renew my vows to you today, but I want to base them on truth rather than fantasy. So let me tell you what I've learned about our marriage in the past few weeks." Ryan's face had gone pale. "Jessica, what are you—" "I've learned that you've been having an affair with my sister Amber for 8 months. My voice remained steady, conversational, as if I were discussing the weather. I've learned that you've been planning to leave me for her, and that you've both been manipulating your respective spouses to make that transition as smooth as possible. Gasps and murmurs erupted from the audience. Ryan's mother made a sound like she'd been slapped. Amber shot to her feet, her face white with panic. "Jessica, stop," Ryan said desperately. "This isn't the time or place." "Actually, Barb, this is the perfect time and place," I said, finally turning to address our guests. "Because all of you are here believing that Ryan and I have worked through our problems, that we've forgiven each other and moved forward. You're here to celebrate our renewed commitment to honesty and trust." I pulled out my phone and held it up. "Eric, would you join me up here? Please." Eric rose from the back row and walked to the altar, his expression grim but determined. Several guests recognized him as Amber's husband and began whispering more urgently. "Eric has been very helpful in documenting the true nature of Ryan and Amber's relationship." I continued. "Show them." Eric. Eric connected his phone to the venue's sound system, a detail we'd arranged in advance. The first image that appeared on the large screen behind the altar was a text message thread between Ryan and Amber, dated 6 weeks ago. "Ryan, I can't keep pretending with Jessica. Every day feels like a lie. Amber, I know, baby, but we have to be smart about this. Eric's already suspicious. And if Jessica finds out before we're ready..." Ryan, ready for what? "To destroy 2 marriages, to tear apart your family. Amber, ready to be together. Really together, isn't that what we both want?" The messages continued, showing Ryan and Amber planning their future while discussing how to gradually separate from their spouses. Hotel reservations, apartment searches in Seattle, detailed timelines for ending both marriages. Ryan lunged for Eric's phone, but I caught his arm. "Let them see it all. Ryan, let them see what our marriage really looked like while you were planning your exit strategy." "This is insane," Amber shouted from the audience. "Jessica, you're having some kind of breakdown. Ryan chose you. He ended things with me to save your marriage." "Did he?" I asked, signaling Eric to advance to the next set of messages. These were from just 2 days ago. After Ryan had supposedly committed to our reconciliation. "Ryan, I can't stop thinking about you. About us. Amber, I know. God, I know. But Jessica's finally trusting me again. If I mess this up now, Ryan, so you're just going to give up on us, on what we have, Amber." "I'm not giving up. I'm being strategic. Once we're in Seattle, once she's settled and comfortable, we can figure out how to make this work. Ryan, promise me. Promise me you're not choosing her over me. Amber, I promise you're the one I want. Ryan, you're the one I love. This is just temporary." The silence in the venue was deafening. Ryan stood frozen beside me, his face a mask of horror as he realized the full scope of what I'd discovered. "That message thread continued until yesterday," I said conversationally. "Right up until Ryan was texting Amber about how much he was looking forward to their new beginning in Seattle." I turned back to Ryan, whose hands were shaking visibly now. "So, let me ask you again, Ryan. Do you want to renew our vows? Do you want to promise to love, honor, and cherish me while you're planning your life with my sister?" "Jessica," Ryan's voice was barely a whisper. "I can explain. Those messages, they don't mean what you think. They mean exactly what I think," I said firmly. "They mean that you've been lying to me every day since I caught you with Amber. They mean that every romantic gesture, every apology, every promise you've made has been a calculated manipulation designed to keep me compliant while you planned your escape." I turned to face the assembled guests again. "I brought you all here today because I wanted witnesses. I wanted you to see what betrayal really looks like. And I wanted you to understand that some marriages can't be saved because one person never intended to save them." Ryan suddenly came alive, grabbing my shoulders and trying to turn me away from our audience. "Stop this. Stop this right now. We can talk about this privately. Work through it like adults." "Adults," I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "Adults don't plan elaborate deceptions. Adults don't gaslight their spouses while arranging affairs. Adults don't stand at altars promising forever while texting other women about their real future plans. I shrugged out of his grasp and looked at him with all the contempt I'd been hiding for weeks. Ryan, I want a divorce. I want you out of our house by the end of the week. And I want you to understand that every single person in this room now knows exactly what kind of man you are. Jessica, please, Amber called out, pushing through the crowd toward the altar. You don't understand. Ryan and I, we tried to fight our feelings. But sometimes love just happens. It doesn't mean we're terrible people. Actually, it does, Eric interrupted, advancing to the next screen of evidence. Because you didn't just have an affair. Amber, you systematically destroyed your marriage with me and Jessica's by lying, manipulating, and betraying everyone who trusted you. The new images showed Amber's research into Jessica's work schedule, Ryan's business trips, and Eric's therapy appointments. She'd been tracking everyone's movements to create opportunities for her affair while minimizing the risk of discovery. You studied us, I said, looking at Amber with disgust. You studied our lives like a predator studies prey, looking for weaknesses you could exploit. That's not, Amber started. You convinced Eric he was imagining things when he suspected the affair. You told him he needed therapy for his paranoia while you were sleeping with my husband in our bed. You made him question his own sanity to protect your lies. Eric stepped forward, his voice carrying across the silent venue. Amber told me I was becoming controlling and jealous. She convinced me to start taking anxiety medication because my unfounded suspicions were damaging our marriage. She made me believe I was the problem while she was planning to leave me for Ryan. The cruelty was breathtaking, and I could see it registering on the faces of our guests. This wasn't a simple case of two people falling in love despite their circumstances. This was psychological warfare waged against the people who'd loved and trusted them most. So, no, I said, pulling off my wedding ring and setting it on the altar. I won't be renewing my vows today. I won't be moving to Seattle. And I won't be pretending that this marriage can be salvaged by a man who never intended to salvage it. Ryan stood there looking lost and desperate, probably trying to calculate whether there was any way to spin the situation back in his favor. Amber had sunk into a nearby chair, her face buried in her hands as the full scope of their exposure sank in. One more thing, I added, pulling out a manila envelope. Ryan, these are divorce papers. I'm filing on grounds of adultery, and thanks to the post-nuptial agreement you signed, I'll be keeping the house, the practice, and most of our savings. You can keep your business in your car, and you're welcome to start your new life with Amber using whatever's left. I handed him the papers, then turned to address the crowd one final time. Thank you all for coming today. I know this isn't the ceremony you expected, but I hope it's been educational. There's champagne and cake in the reception hall if anyone's interested in staying. Consider it a celebration of truth, justice, and the end of a marriage that should have ended months ago. As I walked down the aisle, leaving Ryan standing alone at the altar, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Freedom, the weight of pretense, of performance, of trying to save something that had never been worth saving, lifted from my shoulders. Behind me, I could hear the chaos erupting as guests processed what they'd witnessed. Shocked conversations, angry accusations, the sound of someone sobbing, probably Amber, but I didn't look back. I had one more CE to make before this was truly finished. I found Amber in the parking lot 20 minutes later, leaning against her car and sobbing into her phone. She was speaking to someone in desperate, pleading tones, probably trying to find a friend or family member who would comfort her after what had just happened. She ended the call when she saw me approaching. Jessica, she said, wiping her eyes, I know you hate me right now, but please let me explain. There's nothing to explain, I said calmly. Everything's out in the open now. Everyone knows what you and Ryan did, how you did it, and how long you've been planning it. There are no more secrets to keep. Amber straightened, and I saw a flash of anger replace the tears in her eyes. You humiliated us in front of everyone. You could have handled this privately, but instead you chose to destroy us publicly. I chose to tell the truth publicly. If that destroyed you, it's because your actions were destructive, not because my revelation was inappropriate. Ryan loves me, Amber said desperately. I know you showed those messages, but you don't understand the context. We were trying to do the right thing, trying to end our marriages without hurting anyone. By lying to everyone involved for 8 months, by being careful, by making sure Eric and I would be okay before you made any permanent decisions. The delusion was so complete, it was almost impressive. Amber had convinced herself that her elaborate deception had been an act of kindness rather than manipulation. Amber, I said gently, I need you to understand something. Ryan doesn't love you. Yes, he does. You saw the messages. I saw messages from a man who was keeping his options open. Ryan was never going to leave me for you. He was going to use you for as long as it was convenient, then find a way to keep both of us in his life. Amber shook her head violently. That's not true. He told me he loved me. He said I was the one he wanted. He told you what you needed to hear to keep sleeping with him, just like he told me what I needed to hear to keep supporting him financially and socially. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a message thread I hadn't shown the wedding guests. Would you like to see what Ryan really thinks about you? The messages were between Ryan and his business partner. Dated 2 weeks ago, Marcus. How's the situation with your wife and her sister, Ryan? Complicated. Jessica's being surprisingly forgiving, which is great for my image and my finances. Amber's convinced I'm going to leave Jessica for her, which keeps her quiet about the affair. Marcus, and what are you actually going to do, Ryan? Play it smart. Keep Jessica happy until the Seattle thing is settled, then gradually phase Amber out. I can't afford a messy divorce right now, and Amber's too unstable for a serious relationship anyway. Marcus cold, man, Ryan practical. Jessica's the better long-term investment. Established career, family money, social connections. Amber's great for fun, but she's not wife material. Amber read the messages twice, her face growing paler with each word. He said I wasn't wife material. He said I was unstable and not a good long-term investment. He was planning to use our reconciliation to secure his financial future, then dump you once he didn't need you to keep quiet anymore. Amber slumped against her car, the full reality finally hitting her. But he promised me. He said we'd be together in Seattle. He lied to you the same way he lied to me. The difference is that I figured it out before I destroyed my life completely. For several minutes, we stood in silence. Amber processed the magnitude of her situation while I watched her world crumble in real time. So, what happens now? She finally asked. Now you face the consequences of your choices. Eric's filing for divorce. Ryan will probably try to blame everything on you to save his reputation. Your family knows what you did. Your friends were at that ceremony and saw the evidence. You'll have to rebuild your entire life from scratch. And you? Amber looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. You get everything you want. I get justice. I get freedom from a marriage built on lies. I get to keep the life I worked hard to build instead of watching Ryan steal it piece by piece. I paused, considering my next words carefully. But I don't get my sister back. I don't get to trust family the way I used to. I don't get to believe in forever anymore. Amber's face crumpled. Jessica, I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. But I need you to know that I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant to hurt you like this. But you did hurt me like this. And when you had chances to stop, to tell the truth, to minimize the damage, you chose to lie deeper and hurt me more. I softened my voice slightly. Amber, I hope you get help. Real help. I hope you figure out why you thought it was acceptable to destroy your family for a man who saw you as disposable. I hope you become someone better than who you've been. Does that mean someday, could we maybe? I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at you and not see this betrayal. But I hope for your sake that you become someone worth forgiving, even if I'm never able to do it. Amber nodded. tears streaming down her face again. I love you, Jessica. I know I have a terrible way of showing it, but I do love you. I love you too, I admitted. That's why this hurts so much. I turned to walk away, then stopped. Amber, the therapist you mentioned, Hendricks. What about him? I called his office yesterday. There's no Hendricks practicing in this city. There never has been. Amber's face went white. One more lie, I said sadly. Even when you were trying to convince me you were getting help, you were still lying. I left her standing in the parking lot and walked to my car, feeling strangely empty. The revenge was complete. The truth was revealed, and justice had been served. Ryan would lose his reputation, his marriage, and most of his assets. Amber would lose her family, her marriage, and her social standing. But as I drove away from Riverside Gardens, I realized that revenge, no matter how perfectly executed, couldn't give me back what I'd really lost. It couldn't give me back the ability to trust completely. It couldn't give me back the sister I'd lost or the marriage I'd believed in. The morning sun streamed through the windows of my newly redecorated living room as I sipped coffee and reviewed patient files for the day ahead. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, despite the painful memories it held. I'd kept the good pieces and replaced everything that reminded me of Ryan and Amber. The cream sectional where I'd found them was gone, replaced by a blue velvet couch that was entirely mine. The wedding photos had been taken down and replaced with pictures of my medical school graduation, my achievements, my friends. The rose bushes Ryan had planted were pulled up and replaced with a garden I designed myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Eric. Coffee this afternoon, I have news. Good news or bad news, I replied. Depends on your perspective. Amber's engagement announcement went live this morning. I nearly choked on my coffee. Engagement to whom? Some guy she met in Portland. Apparently, she moved there after the Seattle job fell through. They've been dating for 3 months. 3 months. Amber had managed to find another relationship in the time it took most people to process a major life trauma. Some patterns never changed. How do you feel about it? I texted back, relieved honestly. It means she's officially someone else's problem now. I laughed despite myself. Eric had developed a dark sense of humor since our divorce proceedings began. It suited him. Coffee at 3, Brewster's Cafe? Perfect. See you there. I set down my phone and continued reviewing my files. But my mind wandered to the events of the past 6 months. The divorce had been finalized within 8 weeks. Thanks to Ryan's eagerness to avoid further public scrutiny, he'd tried to contest the post-nuptial agreement, but the evidence of his continued affair planning had made his position untenable. He'd moved to Seattle alone, taking the job he'd thought would be our fresh start. According to mutual friends, he was struggling professionally and personally. His reputation had followed him across the country, and the Morrison Group was reportedly reconsidering their partnership offer. Amber had tried to follow him, just as Eric and I had predicted. But Ryan, faced with the reality of public exposure and professional consequences, had made it clear that their relationship was over. She'd spent 2 weeks in Seattle trying to convince him otherwise before finally accepting that he'd meant what he'd said in those messages to his business partner. She'd never been wife material to him. She'd been a convenient distraction that had become an inconvenient liability. The irony was perfect. My practice had thrived in the months since the ceremony, far from damaging my reputation. The revelation of Ryan's betrayal had generated sympathy and respect from my colleagues and patients. They saw me as someone who'd handled an impossible situation with dignity and intelligence. I'd been invited to speak at conferences about resilience in the medical profession, and my patient load had increased as word spread about my approach to healing trauma. It turned out that surviving betrayal publicly had made me more relatable and trustworthy, not less. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I'd grown cautious about unexpected visitors since the ceremony. Too many reporters and curious neighbors had tried to get interviews in the immediate aftermath. Through the peephole, I saw a delivery person holding a large bouquet of flowers. I opened the door cautiously. Dr. Jessica Lewis. Yes, these are for you. He handed me the bouquet and waited while I signed for it. After he left, I examined the flowers. White daisies mixed with yellow roses. My actual favorite combination. The card was simple. For a fresh start, a friend. No signature, no return address. I searched the bouquet for clues but found nothing. As I arranged the flowers in a vase, I found myself smiling for the first time in weeks. Someone, maybe Eric, maybe one of my colleagues, maybe even a grateful patient, had thought to brighten my day with flowers that actually reflected my preferences. It was a small gesture, but it felt significant. After months of being defined by betrayal and revenge, someone saw me as worthy of simple kindness. My phone rang, displaying an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Dr. Lewis, this is Jennifer Walsh from Seattle General Hospital. I know this is unexpected, but we have a position opening in our trauma department, and your name came highly recommended. I nearly dropped the phone. I'm sorry, who recommended me? Actually, it was Dr. Willa Hendricks. She attended your presentation at the medical conference last month and was very impressed with your work. Dr. Hendricks, the therapist Amber had claimed to be seeing, who didn't exist in our city, apparently did exist in Seattle. Dr. Hendricks suggested that you might be interested in a change of scenery. Jennifer continued, we're looking for someone with your expertise in trauma recovery, and frankly, we're willing to offer a very competitive package to get the right person. I looked around my newly decorated living room, thinking about the life I'd rebuilt here and the memories, both good and bad, that tied me to this place. Can you send me the details? I heard myself saying. I'd like to review the position. Absolutely, and I'll email everything this afternoon. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet of my house, considering the possibility of starting over somewhere new, not running away from my past, but choosing my future on my own terms. The irony wasn't lost on me. Ryan had wanted to take me to Seattle as part of his escape plan, his fresh start built on deception. Now I was being offered the chance to go there on my own merit, with my own goals, carrying my own truth. That afternoon, I met Eric at Brewster's Cafe, the same corner table where we'd first planned our investigation 6 months ago. You look different, he said as he sat down. Good different, peaceful. I got a job offer today, in Seattle. Eric's eyebrows rose. Seattle. That's ironic. Yes, but also potentially perfect. I told him about the call from Jennifer Walsh, about Dr. Hendricks' recommendation, about the opportunity to build something entirely new. What about your practice here? I could sell it to Dr. Martinez. She's been wanting to expand, and she understands my patient load. They'd be in good hands. Eric was quiet for a moment, processing. Are you running away? No, I said without hesitation. 6 months ago, I would have been, but this isn't about escaping what happened here. It's about choosing what happens next. And Ryan, he's still in Seattle, presumably. Seattle's a big city, and even if we cross paths, what's he going to do? He's the one who destroyed our marriage. He's the one who has to live with the consequences of his choices. I'm not going to limit my opportunities because of his presence. Eric smiled. You really have changed. We both have. Well, 6 months ago, we were both victims of other people's choices. Now we're making our own choices. Speaking of choices, Eric pulled out his phone and showed me a picture. I've been dating someone. The photo showed Eric with a woman about our age, both of them laughing at something off camera. She had kind eyes and a genuine smile, and Eric looked happier than I'd seen him in years. Her name is Amanda. She's a librarian at the high school where I teach. She's never been married, has no interest in drama, and thinks my ex-wife sounds like a sociopath. I like her already. She wants to meet you before you potentially move across the country. She says anyone who helped me survive Amber deserves her respect and gratitude. We talked for another hour about new beginnings. about the strange ways life could surprise you, about the difference between healing and revenge. As I drove home, I thought about the flowers waiting on my kitchen table, about the job offer that represented possibility rather than escape, about Eric's new relationship and the peace I'd found in solitude. Ryan and Amber had thought they were writing the story of my life when they decided to betray me. They'd cast me as the obstacle to their happiness, the problem to be solved, the casualty of their great love affair. But they'd forgotten that I was the protagonist of my own story. And protagonists don't stay defeated. They adapt, they overcome, and they write their own endings. Epilogue. 3 weeks later, I accepted the position at Seattle General, not because I was running from my past, but because I was running toward my future. As I packed the last of my belongings, I found the manila envelope that had contained Ryan's divorce papers. Inside, tucked behind the legal documents, was a handwritten letter I'd written to myself on the night I discovered their affair. The night I'd sat in my hotel room planning my revenge. Dear future Jessica, by the time you read this, you'll know whether justice was worth the pain it took to achieve it. You'll know whether rebuilding was harder than destroying. You'll know who you are when everything you thought you knew about yourself has been stripped away. I hope you're proud of the woman you became. I hope you chose truth over comfort, strength over bitterness, and hope over revenge. But most of all, I hope you chose yourself. Love. Past Jessica P. S. Don't forget to feed the daisies. I smiled, remembering the woman who'd written those words in her darkest hour. She'd been broken but not defeated, betrayed but not destroyed. She'd been me at my lowest point, planning my comeback. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my suitcase, a reminder of how far I'd traveled from that hotel room to this new beginning. Outside, a moving truck waited to take my belongings to their new home. Inside, my empty house echoed with memories of both pain and triumph. As I locked the door for the last time, I whispered a thank you to the woman I'd been and a promise to the woman I was becoming. Then I got in my car and drove toward whatever came next, carrying nothing with me but the truth, my hard-earned wisdom, and the absolute certainty that I would never again let anyone else write the story of my life. In the rearview mirror, I watched my old life disappear around a corner. In the windshield ahead, I saw the rest of my story waiting to be written, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I couldn't wait to see how it ended.